The wind, a banshee wailing from the frozen, black heart of the North Atlantic, howled its mournful dirge against the ancient, salt-pocked glass of the lantern room. It was a relentless, icy breath that seemed to carry whispers from the abyssal depths below, a chorus of forgotten lamentations, the echoed dying cries of countless drowned souls, pressing against the very consciousness of Elias Thorne, chilling him to the marrow, invading his thoughts, and promising a desolation he had never before conceived, a final, absolute void. His spirit, once vibrant and filled with the light of intellect and the warmth of love, a man who had navigated the complexities of literature and the tender intricacies of human connection with grace and understanding, now felt as battered and weathered as the lighthouse itself, a crumbling edifice exposed to the ceaseless, unforgiving elements, mirroring his own internal decay, his soul slowly eroding under the constant assault of grief and terror, a process as slow and relentless as the sea, eroding the rock. He hunched, a figure of profound solitude, almost swallowed by the vastness of the room, a lonely silhouette against the dimly lit space, a prisoner in a stone tower of his own making, or perhaps of the lighthouse's design, over his scarred oak desk, the wood groaning faintly beneath his elbows as if echoing his own fatigue, his own deep, bone-weary weariness, a resonance of despair that hummed beneath his skin. The lone beam of his desk lamp, a fragile circle of amber light, a single point of defiant warmth against an ocean of encroaching darkness, cast a trembling, desperate glow against the encroaching, absolute gloom that clung to the corners of the room like sentient shadows, always threatening to consume the light, to plunge everything into an eternal night, a final, inescapable oblivion that stretched to the very edges of existence. Outside, the North Atlantic gnashed its teeth against the jagged, granite fangs of the coastline, each colossal wave a dull, sickening thud against the very foundations of the old lighthouse, a sound that reverberated through the very floorboards, through the chair, into his bones, a constant, low, primordial growl from the deep, a living, breathing entity awakening, stirring from a slumber of eons, its hunger stirring with it, a hunger that had been dormant but was now ravenous. It was the sound of something vast, ancient, and endlessly hungry, a monstrous appetite that dwarfed all human understanding, all human suffering, all human hope. He had sought solitude here, a desperate, final retreat from the deafening cacophony of a world that had become too loud, too bright, too relentlessly present, too demanding of a man who had lost everything after Eleanor's sudden, brutal vanishing, her essence ripped away from him by the cruel, indifferent hand of fate, leaving a gaping wound that refused to close, a perpetual agony. He had sought silence, a profound, cleansing stillness that promised peace for his tormented soul, a balm for the unceasing ache of grief that clawed at his insides, tearing at his very being, unraveling him stitch by agonizing stitch. And the lighthouse, the forgotten, condemned sentinel of Blackwater Point, a place shunned by all others, whispered about in hushed tones, its very name a taboo, a word that carried the chill of the grave, had delivered it in spades, a silence so profound it hummed with an insidious, almost palpable presence, a watchful, waiting entity, its patience stretching across centuries, now fixed solely, menacingly, on him, its newest, unsuspecting prey, its chosen victim, its next meal. 3 weeks, 3 eternities, 3 weeks since he'd first arrived, a broken man dragging his emotional baggage, heavy as lead weights forged in the crucible of despair, each memory a searing brand upon his soul, and his unfinished manuscript, the sundered soul, a futile, almost mocking attempt at therapy, a desperate plea for catharsis that only deepened his torment, up the winding, treacherous, salt-crusted stairs. The spiral ascent itself had felt less like an ascent into a place of peace and more like a descent into something else entirely, a twisting, claustrophobic path away from the familiar world he knew, a world where Eleanor had existed, where joy was possible, where light still held sway, now a distant, unreachable memory, fading into the mists of time. Each step had groaned under his weight, a lament from the ancient timbers, echoing in the confined, damp space, a constant reminder of the edifice's immense, crumbling age and crushing isolation, a monument to forgotten time and untold misery, built on foundations of sorrow. The air had been thick, cloying even, with the scent of brine, ancient stone, and something else entirely, a faint, almost metallic tang, like old blood mixed with ozone, or the acrid burn of something long dead and forgotten. A miasma that prickled the back of his throat and made his stomach churn with profound, visceral unease, a sickness that started deep within his soul and spread through his very being. It was a smell that had once promised liberation, the stark, wild beauty of a place untouched by human hands, a return to untamed nature, a cleanse for his urban-weary soul, a chance to breathe freely for the first time in years, away from the stifling city. But now it clung to him like a shroud, tightening its hold with every passing day, suffocating him slowly, drawing him deeper into its pervasive influence, its inescapable grasp, its cold, suffocating embrace, like a parasitic twin, feeding on his fear. The lease had been absurdly, suspiciously cheap, a price so low it bordered on the unsettling, almost a bribe, as if the owner was simply desperate to unload a cursed artifact, to be rid of a burden no sane man would bear, a debt no one could truly repay, a legacy of horror inherited unknowingly, unwittingly. That owner, a gaunt, fidgety man named Mr. Abernathy. His skin stretched taut over sharp angles, his eyes sunken and shadowed, like pools of stagnant, ancient water reflecting a hidden dread, had been strangely eager, almost frantic, to be rid of the place. His movements jerky, spastic, like a puppet on frayed strings manipulated by an unseen, malevolent hand. His gaze, small and shifty, had darted away like trapped birds when Elias, sensing something profoundly amiss, sensing a deeper, darker history lurking beneath the surface, had pressed about its past, its previous occupants, its very nature. The chilling whispers of local folklore he'd overheard in the nearest, superstitious fishing village, whispers of disappearances and strange lights, of madness and death, of things best left undisturbed, buried beneath layers of silence and time. Just old Mr. Thorne, very old, and isolated, not for everyone. Indeed, not for everyone at all. Abernathy had stammered, his voice thin as brittle parchment, his breath shallow, barely a gasp, before practically fleeing the exchange, leaving Elias alone with the ominous, expectant silence, the heavy weight of unspoken truths settling around him like a tomb. Abernathy's parting words, delivered with a nervous cough and a hasty retreat that bordered on a sprint, now echoed incessantly in the hollow, echoing chambers of Elias's mind, taking on a more sinister, prophetic resonance with each passing, terrifying day, a slow-burning fuse igniting the powder keg of his burgeoning dread, pushing him closer to an abyss he couldn't yet comprehend, a horror that defied logic, a terror that promised to shatter his very existence, piece by agonizing piece, until nothing remained. The first few days had been a deceptive idyll, a cruel mirage of peace, a fleeting whisper of hope against the backdrop of his profound despair, a fragile shield against the encroaching darkness, or as idyllic as a perpetually gray, storm-lashed rock jutting defiantly into the unforgiving, churning sea could ever be. The grim beauty of the place, its raw, untamed power, had initially captivated him, drawing him in with its stark grandeur, its formidable presence, its untamed wildness, a dangerous allure that promised both beauty and danger. The rhythmic, melancholic clang of the bell buoy outside the point, a somber iron tongue striking a lonely chime in the vastness, had initially been a comforting pulse, a slow, steady heartbeat in the immense, indifferent emptiness, a sound that briefly lulled him into a false sense of security, a fleeting illusion of normalcy, of a world still ordered and rational, where sound could be explained. He'd reveled, or at least tried to, in the raw, untamed power of the ocean, watching its relentless might, feeling its cold spray on his face, tasting the salt on his lips, the sharp tang of the sea, the gulls crying their lonely, desolate calls that seemed to carry the weight of the world's sorrows, their cries echoing his own internal anguish, a shared lamentation, a symphony of grief that played on an endless loop. The sheer, unadulterated solitude had promised not just an unhindered focus for his writing, a sanctuary for his thoughts, a space for creative solace, a place where his ideas could flourish without interruption, but a much-needed balm for his lacerated soul, still raw and bleeding from grief, a wound that never seemed to heal, festering quietly in the silence, deepening with each passing day, each solitary night. He wrote, sometimes for 12, 14 hours straight, lost in the rhythm of words, the sentences a fragile bridge connecting him to a semblance of meaning, the paragraphs a desperate attempt to reconstruct a fragmented world, to find order in chaos, to impose his will upon the void, to create something lasting amidst the impermanence of existence. The words flowed with an effortless ease, a bittersweet torrent he hadn't known since before Eleanor's accident, before her laughter had been silenced, before her vibrant light had been extinguished in the black waters, leaving him in perpetual shadow, a world plunged into an agonizing, silent darkness that echoed the void within him, a darkness that consumed everything. His grief, a constant, heavy companion, a phantom limb that ached perpetually, a dull, agonizing throb that pulsed with every beat of his heart, a constant reminder of his loss, seemed to momentarily recede under the relentless pressure of creation. A fragile dam holding back the encroaching tide of his despair, a desperate, futile effort to outrun the inevitable. He felt a fleeting sense of purpose, a reason to exist beyond the aching void of loss, a desperate clinging to something that resembled life, however tenuously, however fleetingly, however hopelessly, however tragically. But then, almost imperceptibly at first, like the slow tightening of a noose around his neck, cinching tighter with each passing breath, each beat of his faltering heart, each whispered rationalization, the subtle, unsettling shifts began, like the first cracks in a dam. Started with the sounds. Not the familiar, comforting roar of the wind, which he had come to anticipate and almost welcome as a constant, natural force, a companion in his isolation, a lullaby in the storm, a predictable rhythm, nor the predictable, thunderous crash of the waves against the granite base, which grounded him in the physical, tangible world, a reminder of solid ground and a rational reality, but something else entirely. A faint, almost imperceptible creaking from the lower levels, deep within the very bowels of the structure, echoing upwards through the stone and wood, a sound that seemed to come from inside the walls themselves, from the very core of the edifice, from its ancient, unseen heart, even on nights when the sea was a placid slate and the air utterly still. So still it felt unnatural, like the world was holding its breath in anticipation of some horrific revelation, some unspeakable truth about the lighthouse's dark, beating heart. It sounded like the straining of ancient timbers, groaning under an unseen, immense weight, a titanic pressure that threatened to buckle the very structure, to tear it apart from within, or the immense, grinding shift of stone blocks deep within the lighthouse's foundations, as if the very edifice were alive, a colossal, tormented entity, stirring in a restless, malevolent sleep, its slumber disturbed by his unwanted presence, his intrusion, his very existence. Then came the distinct, almost imperceptible shift of air currents, a sudden, chilling draft sweeping through the room, raising goosebumps on his arms, making the hairs on his neck stand on end. A cold caress from an unseen presence, a breath of profound, arctic cold, even when no window was open, no door ajar, no obvious source for such a cold invasion. It was a cold that did not belong, a cold that seeped into his very marrow, into his bones, into his soul, leaving him shivering uncontrollably. He'd rationalized them, of course, desperately clinging to logic, to the thin veneer of sanity. He felt slipping away like sand through his fingers, granule by agonizing granule, dissolving into nothingness, leaving him adrift. Old building, he'd muttered to himself, his voice a frail, desperate whisper in the vast, echoing space, barely audible even to himself, a pathetic attempt at self-reassurance, a futile incantation against the encroaching madness. Just settling, the ocean air playing tricks on sensitive nerves, on a tired mind, a mind too steeped in grief to think clearly, to discern reality from illusion, from nightmare, from the truly impossible. But the rationalizations felt hollow, thin as parchment, crumbling at the slightest touch, dissolving into nothingness, like whistling past a graveyard in the deepest midnight, the sound of the whistle dissolving into the oppressive quiet, leaving only the chilling, profound silence in its wake, amplifying his dread, confirming his deepest, most primal fears, making them concrete, undeniable, terrifyingly real. Then came the cold spots. Not a general, all-encompassing chill that one expected in a desolate lighthouse battered by the North Atlantic. A pervasive damp cold that seeped into everything, making his bones ache with chronic dampness, a constant companion, a familiar discomfort, but discreet, intensely frigid pockets of air that would materialize suddenly, without warning, hanging heavy and still, thick with an unseen frost, like a sudden, icy breath exhaled from a crypt, or the passing of something utterly cold and dead, leaving a void where warmth had been, a vacuum of life. They would linger for agonizing seconds, sometimes minutes, a frozen weight pressing against his skin, seeping into his clothes, chilling him to the core of his being, then dissipate as quickly and mysteriously as they appeared, leaving behind a profound sense of violation, a certainty that something had been there, invisible, hostile, and utterly cold, leaving its insidious mark not just on the air, but on his very soul, a lingering stain of dread that would never wash away, a permanent scar. Once, he'd been making his customary pot of strong, bitter coffee in the small, cramped kitchen, the only source of warmth and comfort in the cold, gray mornings, the steam rising like a fragile prayer, offering a fleeting illusion of domesticity, of normalcy, of a world still sane and predictable. A burst of Arctic cold, sharp and piercing, had enveloped his right hand, clinging to it with an almost physical grip, a burning sensation of ice that seemed to freeze his very blood, to crystallize the despair within him, lingering even after he instinctively pulled it away. A phantom ache deep in his very bones, a chilling echo that wouldn't fade, a brand upon his flesh, a mark of something unseen, something deeply malevolent, something that had touched him with its frozen essence, leaving him forever changed. He'd stared at his hand, then at the empty space where the cold had been, a prickle of primal, unadulterated unease snaking up his spine, a serpent of fear uncoiling in his gut, its fangs already sinking in, poisoning him slowly, inexorably, with the venom of terror, paralyzing him with its cold, insidious grip, locking him in place. The lighthouse was officially decommissioned, its powerful, rotating lamp removed decades ago, salvaged or simply left to rust in some forgotten corner of maritime history, a relic of a safer, more predictable time, a symbol of forgotten purpose, its beacon long extinguished. Yet sometimes, late at night, when the moon was a silver shard slicing through the ragged clouds, a sliver of spectral light in the inky blackness, a faint promise of the cosmic, of something beyond human ken, Elias would catch it. A faint, almost imperceptible flicker from the lens housing above the lantern room, where the old mechanism once sat, humming with forgotten power, a ghostly echo of its former purpose, a lingering resonance of its past life, an unholy memory, a spectral pulse that seemed to beat with a dark, hidden heart. It was too faint to be a simple reflection of the distant stars, too consistent to be a trick of the moonlight on damp glass, too deliberate to be chance, too purposeful to be mere imagination. It had a rhythm, a pulse, a life of its own, beating in sync with his mounting dread, mirroring his accelerating descent. It was a pulse, weak and fleeting, like a dying heart struggling to beat its last, desperate rhythm. A silent SOS from a forgotten entity, or perhaps a call to something darker, something waiting in the vastness beyond, something that longed to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be fed, to claim its due. He'd scramble up the final, rusted, creaking ladder, his breath ragged, heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird desperate for escape, adrenaline surging through his veins, a desperate hope fueling his ascent, only to find the lens cold, dark, and utterly, terrifyingly still, mocking his efforts, its silence a profound accusation, a testament to his increasing delusion, to the fragility of his grip on reality. He'd tell himself it was exhaustion, the flickering of his own desk lamp playing tricks on his strained peripheral vision, a desperate mind seeking patterns where none existed, weaving sanity from threads of madness, each thread fraying under the relentless strain of isolation and fear, of a reality that seemed to be warping around him, becoming malleable to the malevolent influence of the lighthouse, twisting into a nightmare he could not escape, a living, breathing hallucination that consumed his waking hours. The dreams began to intertwine with the fabric of his waking reality, blurring the lines between conscious and unconscious terror until there was no discernible boundary. No safe haven, no escape, no moment of respite, not even in sleep, which offered no solace, only deeper horror. Vivid, chilling nightmares of dark, suffocating water, of crushing constriction, of echoing, guttural screams that were undeniably not his own, yet resonated with a horrifying familiarity, as if they were ancient memories he couldn't quite recall, belonging to someone else, to a legion of the damned, yet now made agonizingly his own, bleeding into his very soul, corrupting his essence. He would wake in a cold, clammy sweat, gasping for air, the metallic taste of salt thick on his tongue, the phantom sensation of being dragged down into the crushing, lightless pressure of the deep, a watery grave that called to him with a siren's alluring, insidious melody, promising a false peace, a deceptive end to his suffering, a treacherous embrace he almost longed for. He'd stumble blindly to the window, peering out at the roiling, churning expanse of the ocean, its surface like a vast, hungry maw, impossibly dark and threatening, half expecting to see something monstrous rise from its depths, something ancient and malevolent staring back with impossible, knowing eyes, reflecting his own despair, mocking his helplessness, confirming his impending doom, a silent testament to his fate, written on the face of the waters. Instead, only the endless, churning gray, mirroring the turmoil in his soul, reflecting his growing despair, a vast, empty canvas for his spiraling madness, a canvas on which the horror was now being painted in grotesque, living detail, an inescapable masterpiece of terror that would forever define his end. The sleep deprivation began to take its toll, painting his days with a dull, persistent ache behind his eyes and a constant thrum of anxiety in his chest that never subsided, a drumbeat of terror, growing louder with each passing hour, each passing minute, each second, a relentless assault on his sanity. His perception of time began to distort, days blending into a continuous, anxious blur, punctuated by moments of piercing dread. He found himself pacing the narrow circumference of the lantern room, hours slipping by unnoticed, blurring into one another, his thoughts a chaotic swirl of fear and exhaustion, his mind a besieged fortress, its walls crumbling with every passing moment, its defenses failing, utterly collapsing under the sustained attack, leaving him exposed, vulnerable, alone. The solitude, once a sanctuary, a longed for escape from the noise of the world, from the constant reminders of his loss, had become a prison, its walls closing in with each passing night, the air growing thick with an unseen, malevolent presence that seemed to breathe down his neck, cold and heavy, a constant, oppressive weight on his soul, pressing him down, suffocating him, stealing his very will, draining him of all resistance. He started talking to himself, whispered rationalizations, desperate pleas for sanity in the face of the inexplicable, his own voice a foreign, unsettling sound in the oppressive quiet, as if someone else were speaking through him, or to him, or perhaps, as if he were already two distinct entities, his very identity fracturing, dissolving, his self disintegrating. He found himself answering the silence, arguing with the shadows, descending into a lonely dialogue with his own unraveling mind. His grasp on reality becoming increasingly tenuous, slipping through his fingers like wet sand, grains of sanity scattering into the void. He would catch himself mid-sentence, his voice hoarse, his throat aching, wondering who he was even speaking to, or if he was speaking at all, or if the words were even his own, or if they were merely echoes of the lighthouse's insidious whispers, insidious suggestions planted within his fragile mind. One evening, as a particularly vicious squall lashed the lighthouse, turning the world outside into a maelstrom of screaming wind and blinding spray, a tempest of nature mirroring the one in his soul, a chaotic symphony of the elements, a prelude to the internal storm that would engulf him, Elias was in the small library on the second floor. It was a cramped, claustrophobic space, filled with mildewed nautical charts that curled like ancient, dying leaves. Their ink faded to ghosts of forgotten routes, forgotten destinies, forgotten lives, forgotten navigational tools crusted with salt, their brass tarnished black, their purpose lost, artifacts of a past that now seemed to bleed into his present, tainting it with historical dread, a history of suffering and doom. And discarded, leather-bound logbooks that exhaled the scent of decay, of forgotten lives and lost ships, of tragedies unspoken, waiting to be revealed, aching to tell their tales, to release their burdens upon him, to share their torment. He was looking for something, anything, that might explain the gnawing unease growing within him, the slow, insidious chill that seemed to emanate not from the outside, from the cold Atlantic, but from the very core of the lighthouse itself, a cold that seeped into his bones, into his marrow, into his very soul, chilling him to the deepest depths of his being. A cold that felt ancient and personal, as if it had always been waiting for him, specifically for him, a chosen vessel. His fingers, trembling slightly, traced the faded, almost illegible spine of an old, heavy leather-bound volume, its binding cracked and brittle, threatening to fall apart in his hands, revealing its secrets to him, whether he wanted them or not. Logs of the Blackwater Point Lighthouse, 1888 to 1892. The dates sent a profound shiver down his spine, connecting him to a past he didn't want to know, a dark lineage he felt himself unwillingly joining, a cursed inheritance he could not escape, a fate predetermined by the malevolent will of the lighthouse, a legacy of unending horror. He pulled it out, a cloud of ancient dust puffing into the air, carrying the scent of decay and forgotten lives, and carried it carefully back to his desk in the relative sanctuary of the lamp room, the only place he felt a semblance of control, however fleeting, however illusory, however doomed, however brief before the inevitable. The first few entries were mundane, almost laughably so, a stark contrast to the terror to come. Meticulous weather reports, precise ship sightings, tedious notes on lamp maintenance and the polishing of brass, the mundane details of a bygone era, of routine and normalcy. A stark reminder of a time when the world made sense, when order prevailed, when such horrors were unimaginable, a time when beacons truly guided, truly saved. But as he turned the brittle, yellowed pages, each crackle of the paper a whisper from the past, each rustle a breath from the grave, his heart beginning to beat a slow, heavy drum against his ribs, a chilling, fragmented narrative began to emerge. The log keeper, a man named Thomas Abernathy, a chilling, sickening echo of the current owner's surname, a name that now tasted like ash in his mouth, a name that resonated with an unholy synchronicity, as if they were all part of the same doomed family, trapped in an inescapable cycle, eternally bound by this monstrous place, chronicled his slow, agonizing descent into madness, or perhaps something far worse, something beyond human comprehension, something that had been waiting patiently for him, waiting for another soul to claim, another light to extinguish, another victim for its endless hunger. August 14th, 1889. The light fails again. Or does it? I see it flicker. A ghost light. It is watching, always watching. From the depths, from the very blackness of the ocean, it watches. Elias felt a cold dread settle in his stomach, a leaden weight, like a stone dragging him down into the very depths of the sea, into the cold, dark abyss, into oblivion itself. The same flickering he had witnessed, a beacon of malevolence, not guidance, a lure to destruction, a promise of doom, a harbinger of death, an invitation to the grave, a summons to the ultimate end. September 3rd, 1889. The knocking returns. From below, from the stone. They want in, or out. God help me. They are scratching. They are always scratching. So many hands. So many desperate, lost hands. The tapping. The insistent, rhythmic thud from the deepest cellars. A sound that now hammered at his sanity, demanding attention, demanding release, demanding an answer he feared more than death itself. An answer that promised ultimate horror, a revelation that would shatter his world. Elias felt his blood run cold, his muscles tensing, a primal urge to flee battling with a morbid curiosity, a horrifying compulsion to understand, to witness the ultimate terror, to finally face what awaited him, what had claimed the others, what waited for him. October 20th, 1889. The voices, from the depths. They sing. Eleanor, no, not Eleanor. A siren's song. Calls to the ships. Calls to me. They know my name. They know my grief. They whisper of her. They promise her back if only I join them. A sweet, cruel lie. They twist her voice. They mock me with her memory. Eleanor. The name leaped off the page, seared into his vision, an incandescent brand upon his retina, burning itself into his mind. A cold, iron fist clenching around Elias's heart, squeezing the breath from his lungs until he gasped, choking on the salty, phantom air of the deep, air that tasted of despair and decay, of something ancient and foul, of death itself. He felt a sickening, dizzying lurch in his stomach, as if the very foundations of the lighthouse had shifted beneath him, betraying his trust, revealing its true, dark, unfathomable nature. A living, malevolent entity, a creature of stone and sea, hunger incarnate, pure, unadulterated evil. Coincidence it had to be. A common name, merely a tragic, horrifying coincidence. A desperate, almost maniacal laugh bubbled up in his throat. A thin, reedy sound swallowed by the oppressive silence that seemed to thicken around him, growing heavier, more absolute, pressing in from all sides, a tangible, suffocating presence, eager to consume him, to absorb him into its horrific being. He tried to tell himself that, over and over, like a prayer, a desperate incantation against the encroaching darkness, but the words were hollow, meaningless, devoid of any power against the growing dread, against the insurmountable horror that was closing in, consuming his reality, piece by agonizing piece. But the meticulous, increasingly frantic script, the dark, damp smudges that looked suspiciously like tears or sea spray, or perhaps something even more sinister, blood or ichor from unspeakable things, the growing desperation and raw terror evident in the logkeeper's words, spoke of a shared, unspeakable terror that transcended time, reaching out across the decades to claim him too, drawing him into its horrifying, ancient embrace, a lineage of despair that was now his birthright, a terrible inheritance he could not refuse, a curse that would follow him to his grave and beyond. The final entry, dated November 5th, 1889, was barely legible, scrawled in a wild, almost unhinged hand that looked as though it had been written by a frantic animal in its death throes, clawing at the paper in its final moments of terror, its last gasp of consciousness before being consumed entirely. The words blurred before Elias's eyes, his vision swimming with unshed tears and growing terror, each syllable a nail hammered into his sanity, sealing his fate, binding him to the lighthouse, to its eternal curse, to its undying hunger, to its malevolent will. She calls. The lantern, it burns for her. The beacon, it guides them to their grave. Cannot stop it. I must join them. The light, it is hungry, so hungry, and now so am I. The end is here, for all of us. The page ended abruptly, the last word trailing off into a dark, ominous stain that could have been water or something infinitely darker, something that had bled from the very soul of the man who wrote it, a final, horrifying testament to despair, a testament he now understood completely, intimately, horrifyingly, as if it were his own story unfolding, his own inevitable conclusion. Elias slammed the ancient book shut, the sharp report echoing unnaturally in the small, confined room, a sound that seemed to shatter the pervasive silence only to leave it more profound, more suffocating, pressing in from all sides, a tangible weight on his chest, a crushing pressure that stole his breath, leaving him gasping for air that felt thin and cold, like breathing in death itself. Thomas Abernathy had disappeared without a trace. The official report, Elias vaguely recalled from his brief research, had cited lost at sea, a tragic but common, almost mundane fate for lighthouse keepers in those unforgiving times. But the logbook, with its horrific, visceral entries, hinted at something far, far more insidious. Something that hadn't just claimed the keeper, but perhaps consumed him, body and soul, leaving nothing but an empty vessel, a hollow shell to be filled by the lingering horror, a fresh host for its malevolence, its ancient, insatiable evil, its unending purpose, a new link in a chain of torment. He looked around the lamp room, a space that now felt less like a sanctuary and more like a carefully laid trap, its walls closing in on him with every pounding beat of his heart, every shallow breath, every desperate gasp for air. The thick, grimy glass panels, the corroded metal fixtures, The very stone walls, ancient and unyielding, seemed to press in on him, suffocating him, stealing his air, crushing him under their immense weight, like a vast, unseen hand slowly squeezing the life out of him, draining him of all vitality, all hope, all will, all semblance of his former self. Had this place, this stone coffin, this solitary spire, driven Thomas Abernathy mad? Or had something within it, something ancient, malevolent, and impossibly patient, slowly devoured his sanity, his very essence, just as it seemed, with horrifying certainty, to be doing to him, piece by agonizing piece, dissolving his mind into madness, rendering him a hollow echo of his former self, a puppet on its strings, dancing to its horrific tune, powerless to resist, utterly subjugated? He started seeing things, not just vague flickers or tricks of light, easily dismissed as fatigue or grief-induced hallucination, but distinct, terrifying shadows. At the periphery of his vision, fleeting, impossible movements in the deepest corners of the room, just out of focus, just beyond direct sight, like a veil being pulled back and forth, teasing his sanity, revealing glimpses of the monstrous, of the unspeakable. A tall, gaunt figure, perpetually on the edge of visibility, just beyond his direct gaze, like a predator circling its prey, waiting for the opportune moment to strike, to reveal itself fully, to claim him, to make its presence undeniable, its horror absolute, its reign complete. He'd whip his head around, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird, frantic to escape, only to find nothing but the empty space, the oppressive silence, the mocking stillness, the chilling absence of an answer, a confirmation of his sanity. Sometimes he'd catch his own reflection in the thick, convex glass of the lens housing, but it wasn't quite right. His eyes seemed to sink deeper into their sockets, hollow and shadowed, his skin paler, almost translucent, and behind him, in the distorted reflection, he saw not the familiar contours of the room, but a swirling, inky blackness, punctuated by tiny, pinpricks of light that looked suspiciously like the glowing, malevolent eyes of something vast and terrible, lurking just out of sight, waiting for him, watching him, judging him, always watching, always judging, always hungry, always preparing. The tapping from below became more insistent, more desperate, a soft, rhythmic thud against the stone that seemed to penetrate his very skull, echoing in the hollows of his mind, a relentless, maddening pulse, synchronizing with his terrified heartbeat, urging him deeper into the labyrinth of fear, into the very maw of the nightmare, into the dark heart of the lighthouse. It seemed to originate from the deepest part of the lighthouse, the forgotten, unlit cellars that descended into the very bedrock of the point, closer to the gnawing, hungry sea, to the source of the evil, to the very heart of the malevolence that gripped this place, that pulsed beneath him, a dark, beating heart of pure, ancient malice. He'd never ventured down there. The door to the cellar, a heavy, bolted piece of ancient, weather-beaten wood, gave him an irrational, visceral sense of dread, a profound and absolute fear of what lay beyond, of what lurked in the dark, patiently awaiting his descent, beckoning him into its icy embrace, its chilling depths, a fatal invitation from the abyss. Now, with each tap, each thud, each scrape, the hidden darkness below beckoned, a silent, terrible invitation he felt compelled to answer, a force pulling him downwards, an irresistible draw into the abyss, a magnet to his fear, a fatal attraction, a final descent into oblivion from which there was no return. Sleep became not a refuge, not a sweet escape from reality, but a brutal battlefield, a nightmare he couldn't escape even in waking, a continuation of his torment, a relentless assault on his psyche, eroding his very being, stripping him bare of his humanity. The dreams were no longer just vague echoes of drowning, of the crushing weight of the deep, of watery graves, of the inevitable end. They featured the gaunt shadow figure, its face obscured by an impenetrable darkness, its form shifting and wavering like smoke, beckoning him forward, its voice a low, guttural murmur that resonated not in his ears, but in his very bones, vibrating through his skull, a chilling symphony of the damned, a chorus of lost souls, each note a pang of despair, a whisper of condemnation, an echo of their eternal suffering, their unending agony, their boundless regret. It spoke of sacrifice, of a hunger that spanned centuries, a cosmic, insatiable appetite, of a beacon that was not for guidance, not for salvation, but for luring, for devouring, for the ultimate consumption of all life, all hope, all memory, leaving only echoes in its wake, only the lingering scent of despair, a chilling miasma that clung to him, a foul aroma of death and decay. One night, the wind outside fell utterly silent, a sudden, unnerving cessation of its mournful howl, as if the very elements were holding their breath in anticipation of a grand, terrifying performance, a cosmic horror show orchestrated for his benefit alone, for his final torment. The ocean's roar subsided to a gentle, almost mocking lapping against the rocks, a sound that amplified the unnatural stillness, making it even more terrifying, more profound, a stillness that hummed with a hidden power, an ancient energy, a latent malevolence, waiting to strike, waiting for its cue. An unearthly, absolute calm descended upon Blackwater Point, a stillness so profound it felt like the world itself was holding its breath, anticipating some unspeakable horror, some cosmic unveiling, a moment of terrible truth, a climax of despair, a final, crushing blow that would shatter everything. Elias stood by the window in the lantern room, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, a frantic rhythm against his sanity, staring out at the glassy, inky black expanse of the sea. The moon, a skeletal, bruised sliver, hung impossibly low, casting a pallid, sickly sheen on the water, turning it into a sheet of polished obsidian, a mirror reflecting a nightmare, a mirror reflecting his own impending demise, his inescapable fate, a vision of his end, written on the face of the sea. And then, through the oppressive stillness, he saw it, clearly, undeniably, beyond any doubt, a sight that froze his blood, that shattered his soul. Lights, dozens of them, far out, on the horizon, flickering like distant, malevolent stars, drawing closer with an alarming speed, a fleet of doomed vessels, sailing towards their final destination, their inevitable destruction. Ships, too many, too close to each other, too close to the jagged, hungry reef known ominously as the Serpent's Teeth, a graveyard of lost vessels, a monument to countless maritime tragedies, now poised to claim more, to add to its grisly collection of drowned souls, of shattered lives. The lighthouse, even decommissioned, stood as a silent warning, a forgotten sentinel of danger, a mute testament to past horrors, its purpose now perverted, twisted into an instrument of malevolence, a cruel trick. But these ships were too near, sailing directly, unerringly, into certain cataclysmic danger, as if pulled by an invisible, irresistible current, a magnetic force of doom, sealing their fate, condemning them to the depths, to the cold embrace of the abyss. They were like moths drawn to an invisible, deadly flame, compelled by an unseen, malevolent force, utterly helpless, their fate already sealed, their last moments ticking away, their lives about to be extinguished in the cold, hungry depths, becoming fuel for the ancient entity, their suffering a sweet offering. A cold, paralyzing dread seeped into Elias's very marrow, freezing him to the spot, locking his limbs in a rigor mortis of fear that rooted him to the ground, helpless, immobile, a statue of terror, witnessing the unfolding catastrophe, unable to intervene. He remembered Thomas Abernathy's final, desperate entry in the logbook. The beacon, it guides them to their grave. The words burned into his mind, a prophecy unfolding before his horrified eyes, a script he was now unwillingly a part of, destined to play a role in this endless tragedy, a complicit witness to horror, a silent accomplice to damnation, forever bearing the guilt. He stumbled, his legs suddenly weak, as if moving through deep, viscous water, heavy as lead, towards the center of the lantern room, towards the empty, rusted pedestal where the great lamp once spun its saving light, its former glory now a cruel mockery, a ghost of what was meant to be, a painful reminder of lost hope, a symbol of all that was lost. He put his trembling hands on the cold, pitted metal, and a strange, terrifying current seemed to surge through him, vibrating up his arms, into his chest, a horrifying connection to something ancient, something unspeakable, a conduit for its malevolence, its unholy power, binding him to it, making him a part of it, an extension of its horrific will. He felt the faint, distinct tremor beneath his palms, a deep, resonant thrumming, as if something immense and ancient deep within the very stone of the lighthouse was slowly, malevolently, awakening, stirring from a long, dark slumber, its hunger growing, its power manifesting, reaching out, seeking to devour not just the ships, but him, his very soul. He looked up at the lens housing, his gaze drawn by an irresistible force, a morbid fascination that chained him to the spot, unable to avert his eyes, forced to witness the terrifying spectacle of its awakening, its horrible purpose. And for the first time, he saw it clearly, undeniably, in all its terrifying glory. A light, not a flicker, not a trick of the eye, but a steady, spectral glow emanating from the very core of the thick glass lens. It was faint, yes, but undeniably present, pulsating with a sickly, phosphorescent green hue, like something rotten from the deep, a bioluminescent horror that pulsed with dark energy, radiating an evil warmth, a warmth that chilled him to the bone, a freezing fire that burned away his sanity, leaving only madness in its wake. It was not the warm, friendly light of a comforting beacon, a guide to safety, a sign of hope. It was a lure, an ancient, insidious, hungry lure, calling to the unsuspecting, drawing them to their doom, to their watery graves, to the feast below, a feast that had already claimed so many, and now waited for more, its hunger endless. He stumbled back, tripping over his own feet, crashing against the metal railing, the sound a jarring clang in the sudden stillness, reverberating through the silent room, his mind racing, scrambling to piece together the horrifying fragments of truth, each piece a shard of pain, cutting deeper into his soul, leaving him raw and exposed, utterly vulnerable, utterly lost. The ships, the chilling entries in the logbook, the Arctic cold spots, the fleeting, menacing shadows, the drowning dreams, and Eleanor, a new, terrifying thought surfaced, colder than any cold spot, sharper than any blade, piercing his last vestiges of hope, destroying any remaining shred of comfort, of peace, of sanity, leaving him utterly adrift in a sea of madness, a vast, black ocean of despair.
Eleanor's accident.
Her car, veering inexplicably off the winding cliff road, plunging into the black, churning ocean miles below. The same treacherous stretch of coastline, miles south, but the same unforgiving, hungry waters. Had she too been lured? Had she too been a victim of this ancient, insatiable hunger, another soul claimed by the beacon, another offering to the abyss? The possibility, the terrifying certainty, was a fresh wound in his already broken heart, a wound that would never heal, bleeding endlessly, seeping into his very existence, corrupting him from within. The gaunt shadow materialized directly in front of him, coalescing from the deepening, oppressive shadows of the lamp room, growing denser, more substantial, taking on an almost physical form, radiating an aura of profound dread, a chilling weight that crushed him, stealing his breath, his life force. It was indistinct, a wavering figure of deeper darkness against the already dark room, but its presence was overwhelming, crushing, stealing the air from his lungs, suffocating him, pressing down on his chest with an invisible weight, a force that sought to flatten him into nothingness, to erase his very existence, to make him merely a part of its own, a silent, screaming component. He could feel its malevolent gaze, though no eyes were visible within its swirling form, a weight of pure evil, an ancient, consuming malevolence that permeated his very being, seeping into his bones, into his mind, into every cell, corrupting him entirely. It was hunger, pure, ancient, insatiable hunger, a void that had swallowed countless souls, demanding more, always more, an endless cosmic craving that would never know satiety, that would never be filled, a hunger stretching across eternity, a primordial void. A voice, not heard with his ears, but felt in his very bones, vibrating through his skull, echoing from the shadow, from the ancient walls, from the very air around him, a chorus of malevolent glee, a symphony of triumph and despair, a choir of the damned, singing their eternal lament. It was a chorus of whispers, a symphony of lost souls, a discordant, horrifying harmony, all speaking as one. Their voices a mournful, triumphant wail, celebrating their victory, his surrender, his inevitable demise, his absorption into the collective, into the eternal torment. Welcome, Elias. Another lamp, another flame, another feast. Join us, be consumed. Your torment is our delight. Your suffering sustains us. Your despair will be our joy, forever and ever. We are legion. You are ours. You cannot escape. You belong to us. He screamed, a raw, primal sound ripped from the deepest parts of his throat. A sound devoid of hope, of reason. A sound of pure, unadulterated terror. A desperate, animalistic shriek. But it was swallowed, utterly consumed, by the sudden, deafening roar of the wind that whipped through the lantern room. A hurricane-force gale despite the external calm. Though no windows had opened, no doors had moved, a sound that obliterated everything else. His own voice lost in the maelstrom. A tiny, insignificant cry against the infinite, against the cosmic horror that had descended upon him. A force beyond his wildest nightmares. The spectral green light from the lens housing flared. A sickening, unholy nova, bathing the entire room in an incandescent, emerald glow, revealing horrors within its depths, painting the air with a terrifying luminescence, a living, breathing evil that pulsed with malignant intent, with an ancient, malevolent consciousness, a predatory intelligence. The faces of those who had been consumed by the lighthouse, by its ancient hunger, flashed before his eyes in agonizing detail, a rapid-fire montage of terror, each face a testament to eternal suffering, to profound regret, to absolute despair, their eyes wide with a final, horrific understanding, their mouths contorted in silent screams of unending agony. Thomas Abernathy, his face twisted in frozen terror, his eyes wide with a recognition that came too late, his mouth open in a silent scream, forever trapped, forever tormented. Countless sailors, their faces contorted in agony, their eyes wide with the chilling, final realization of their doom as the waves engulfed them, dragging them into the lightless abyss, their desperate hands clawing at nothing, their bodies dissolving. And then Eleanor, his beloved Eleanor, her face serene, eyes closed, as if at peace, a heartbreaking image of calm amidst the horror, a final beautiful lie, even as the dark water closed over her, pulling her down into the abyss, forever lost, forever gone. Now part of the chorus, part of the monstrous whole, forever singing her siren song of death, forever tempting others. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, a terrifying, maddening crescendo, weaving themselves into a relentless, inescapable mantra that hammered at his sanity, driving him to the brink of utter madness, pushing him over the edge, into the void, into the waiting maw, into the final darkness. Join us. Be the light. Guide them home. Be the endless feast. Embrace the dark. Become us. Your soul belongs to the depths. Surrender, Elias. Surrender. Let go. Be one with us. Forever. Endless. Hungry. You are ours. You are already ours. His mind fractured, splintering into a million pieces under the relentless assault. His thoughts a chaotic, agonizing storm, tearing his consciousness apart, shredding it into nothingness, into dust, into a fine, ethereal mist, dissolving into the very air, becoming formless. He pressed his hands to his temples, digging his nails into his scalp, trying desperately, futilely, to shut out the voices, the horrifying images, the undeniable, agonizing truth that was consuming him, molecule by molecule, until nothing of Elias remained, only the echo of his torment, a lingering shadow of a man, soon to be extinguished, absorbed entirely, becoming just another part of the lighthouse's monstrous consciousness, a voiceless scream in the unending chorus. The lighthouse wasn't just a place. It was a living, breathing, hungry entity, an ancient predator rooted to the earth, using the beacon as its insidious lure, drawing unsuspecting souls to their watery graves, to its insatiable maw, to become part of its unending hunger, its eternal suffering, its grotesque purpose. And he, Elias Thorne, was to be its next keeper, its next willing victim, or perhaps its next eternal, tormented prisoner, bound to its horrifying purpose, forever serving its hunger, forever cursed to be its accomplice in damnation, in the destruction of countless lives, a silent partner in atrocity, a willing instrument of evil, a puppet of the abyss. He looked back at the distant lights on the horizon, his vision blurred by tears and the searing green light, now pulsing with a feverish intensity, a malevolent heart beating in the darkness, drawing them ever closer, ever faster, like a spider reeling in its prey, their fates sealed. The ships were closer now, their forms becoming clearer, their masts stark against the bruised sky, their lights tiny, hopeful sparks against the vast, dark canvas of the sea, sailing innocently into the maw of death, a tragic, inevitable procession, their final voyage, their last breath, their last hope fading with each passing second. He knew with a horrifying, soul-crushing certainty that they were sailing to their doom, drawn by the spectral green light only he, the tormented, the chosen, could see, amplified by the lighthouse's ancient, unspeakable hunger, a hunger that would soon be sated, leaving behind only wreckage and despair, a feast for the deep, a sacrifice to the void, a testament to its boundless power, its ultimate dominion. He had to warn them. He had to stop it. The thought, a tiny flicker of defiance, sparked in the dying embers of his sanity. A last desperate act against the inevitable, a final futile attempt at heroism, at redemption, before he too was utterly consumed, his spirit extinguished forever, leaving only the husk, the shell of a man. He stumbled towards the door, his legs heavy, as if moving through deep, viscous water, fighting against an unseen current that pulled him back, drawing him deeper into the lighthouse's embrace, into its inescapable grasp, its crushing power, its unyielding will, its malevolent heart. But the shadow blocked his way, expanding, its presence suffocating, dense as a tangible wall, an impenetrable barrier of pure darkness, radiating an intense, soul-numbing cold that penetrated his very bones, chilling him to the depths of his being, to the core of his soul. The whispers became a deafening roar, a cacophony of agony and triumphant, malevolent laughter, filling the entire lighthouse, shaking its very foundations, reverberating through his bones, through the very stone of the structure, through the bedrock itself. A sound that would echo for eternity, a sound of triumph. No escape. You are ours. You are the beacon. You are the hunger. Surrender. Join your beloved. Forever and ever. There is no end. Only us. Only the hunger. Only the void. A new voice, faint at first, then growing louder, clear and pure despite the overwhelming tumult, pierced through the chaos, cutting through the din of the damned. A last whisper of hope, a desperate plea from the one he loved most, his reason for existing, his anchor to reality, his only salvation, his last connection to humanity. It was Eleanor's voice, his Eleanor. Elias, don't let it. Fight. Remember me. Don't let go. You are stronger than this. Break free. Don't let it win. For us, for our love, for everything we lost. Fight. Don't become like them. He faltered, tears streaming down his face, burning trails on his cold cheeks, a mix of grief and renewed terror, a brutal conflict raging within him, tearing him apart, shredding his last ounce of will, his final vestige of self, his last coherent thought, his final shred of humanity. Eleanor, his love, lost to the depths, now a spectral whisper, a desperate plea from beyond the veil, a final tether to sanity, a last chance at salvation, at escaping the eternal damnation that awaited him. Was this truly her, trapped here, desperate to save him from her own fate, from the same watery doom, reaching out from beyond the grave, pulling him back from the brink of oblivion? Or was it another cruel, insidious trick of the lighthouse, another phantom illusion to lure him deeper into its grasp, to complete his surrender, to make his demise sweeter, more complete, more agonizingly final? A twisted mockery of love, A final sadistic jest before his mind broke completely and irrevocably? He didn't know. He couldn't know. Sanity was a distant shore, a fading memory, now disappearing entirely in the tempest of his mind, leaving only the storm, the chaos, the overwhelming fear, and the relentless, maddening whispers, a cacophony of terror that filled his skull, deafening him to all else, drowning him in madness. The green light pulsed, brighter now, an unbearable intensity, casting shifting, monstrous shadows that danced around him, mimicking the grotesque forms of countless drowning victims, their arms outstretched in a silent, eternal beckoning, calling him to join them in their watery grave, their eyes dark voids of despair, their faces contorted in silent screams of endless torment, a macabre ballet of the damned, a performance for the abyss. The tapping from below had become a frantic, scratching scrabbling, a sound of countless hands tearing at stone, at flesh, at sanity itself, trying to break free or pull him down into the crushing darkness, into the maw of the abyss, into the embrace of the ancient hunger that waited below, impatiently, relentlessly, calling his name, pulling him inexorably downward. Elias closed his eyes, taking a shuddering, ragged breath, inhaling the cold, briny air that tasted of death and despair. A taste he now knew too well, a taste that lingered on his tongue, a bitter, metallic tang, forever etched into his being, into his soul, a part of him. He was the only one who could see the truth. He was the only one who could fight. But against what? An ancient entity, older than time, older than the very stars, older than the concept of fear itself, the very stone of the lighthouse infused with a malevolent, cosmic will, a primordial hunger that could never be sated, only temporarily appeased, leaving a trail of endless victims, a legacy of sorrow, a history of suffering, a testament to its unending cruelty. He opened his eyes. The gaunt shadow loomed, vast and terrible, its form now a swirling vortex of darkness, a black hole in reality, sucking all light and hope into its depths, a profound and absolute nothingness, a void incarnate, boundless and eternal, its presence crushing, suffocating. The green light throbbed, illuminating the distant ships, now perilously, fatally close to the reef, their demise a certainty, their outlines becoming blurred, dissolving in the spectral glow, already half consumed, their fate sealed by the malevolent beacon, their lives forfeit, their screams soon to begin, joining the chorus of the damned. He felt an overwhelming, almost blissful urge to succumb, to let the whispers take him, to find peace in the cold, dark depths, to join Eleanor in eternal slumber, to end the torment, to finally rest, to be free of the horrifying burden of existence, of his own unraveling, of the endless pain, to simply cease to be, to become nothing. But then he saw it. In the reflection of the thick glass, for a fleeting, horrifying moment, he saw the shadow's true, unholy form. Not a humanoid figure, not a ghost, but a vast, tentacled maw, impossibly ancient, stretching from the deepest, blackest abyss of the ocean floor, consuming everything, its countless eyes the distant, flickering lights of the unsuspecting ships, drawing them in like plankton to its gaping, primordial maw. The lighthouse was not just a conduit. It was the tongue, the very gullet, of something unspeakable, rooted in the abyss, eternally hungry, eternally waiting, eternally devouring, its appetite never to be sated, its hunger endless, its victims countless, its reign absolute, its horror undeniable, its power unchallengeable. He screamed again, a sound devoid of hope, stripped bare of sanity, filled only with the raw, absolute terror of absolute powerlessness, a final guttural cry against the inevitable, against the monstrous truth that had now fully revealed itself, destroying his world, his mind, his very soul, obliterating his existence. The spectral light pulsed one last, blinding time, an emerald explosion that enveloped him, consumed him whole, leaving no trace, no memory of Elias Thorne, only the lingering scent of salt and fear, a faint echo in the empty air, soon to dissipate entirely, swallowed by the vast silence. The ships sailed on, oblivious, their crews unaware, drawn by the invisible, deadly beacon, closer and closer to the jagged, hungry teeth of Blackwater Point. Their screams soon to join the chorus, their souls destined for the endless feast, for oblivion in the depths, for an eternity of torment, forever enslaved, forever lost. And as the first terrible crash echoed faintly from the distant reef, a sound that carried on the now silent wind, a prelude to the symphony of destruction, a herald of doom, Elias Thorne was no longer Elias Thorne. He was merely another flicker in the spectral green light, another whispered moan in the endless chorus of the damned, another lost soul, eternally bound, guiding the way to the darkness below. The beacon burned, and it was endlessly, cosmically, horrifically hungry. His final thought, a fleeting, desperate image of Eleanor, dissolved into the green light, becoming one with the vast, consuming entity, absorbed into its horrific existence, its eternal torment, its insatiable hunger. The lighthouse stood, a monument to despair, its light a lie, its purpose a monstrous trap for the unwary. The ocean continued its eternal gnashing, its ceaseless hunger, and somewhere, deep within its cold, dark embrace, the hunger stirred, patiently waiting for the next beacon, the next soul, the next meal, in an endless cycle of dread and consumption. And the silence, the profound, absolute silence, returned to Blackwater Point, heavier and more insidious than before, filled with the presence of countless devoured souls, a silent testament to its malevolent power, its eternal reign, its unending feast, its horrifying immortality.